Today we'll be introducing to you Behavior Functions and Replacement by Ariadna Ramirez. Ariadna.
Hi, everybody. So today we're going to be going over the functions of behavior and kind of what we typically do when we want to get rid of those problem behaviors and work on things that we want our students or those individuals to learn. So the idea is you'll be able, at the end of this, you'll be able to identify the four functions of behavior, understand the basics on identifying these functions, why the functions matter, and how to identify appropriate replacement behaviors. This is not a one all be all. There is still more that you can do to work on it, but this is meant to cover the basics of this. So first things first, the four functions, the easiest way to remember them is everyone eats. It is my favorite way to explain it. Everybody likes food. And so this is an acronym for escape, attention, tangible, and sensory. These are the four possible functions that a behavior can have. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that a behavior doesn't have to just be one function. It can serve multiple purposes, which can make things a little more tricky. But once you have the rationale down, then it's a lot easier to kind of have a game plan on how you're addressing these. So the first of these is escape, right? So escape typically occurs when the person wants to get out of doing something, wants to avoid something. This always happens after an instruction is given, a demand is placed. As an adult, I don't like paperwork. Filing and doing paperwork is super aversive. I am not a fan. So let's say you're putting something off, like, oh, all right, please go ahead and file these forms. Oh, yeah, sure, I'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to take care of this first. So while it is an appropriate behavior, I'm still avoiding engaging in that designated task, right? A more common occurrence that you can see in the school is when you give a kiddo, let's say, a math worksheet. Okay, we're going to sit down, do math, insert kid starting to cry or starting to yell because they don't want to do that math assignment. And so they do this until the math magically goes away. And so they're getting out of it. They no longer have to engage in it. Then we have attention. This can happen when the individual or the student wants attention from another person. This can be from a peer, this can be from adults. The biggest thing to remember with attention, and I know it sounds a little crazy, but there's no such thing as good or bad attention. When it is an attention maintained behavior, giving the kiddo and giving that individual like a high five versus like yelling at them like, what are you doing? I already gave you instructions. These function the same when it comes to the behavior management side. I know it can feel counterintuitive just because human nature, we want to kind of set the record straight, be like, I already told you, why aren't we following instructions? When it is an attention maintained behavior, we definitely have to kind of like rein that impulse in, and we don't want to feed into it. We want to typically minimize any verbal responses or attention that we're giving for whatever that behavior is. There's this great example that you can find online that there's an adult and they're in a separate room of the house, and the child like walks over, looks at the adult, and like throws himself on the floor and starts screaming and crying, and then they're like watching the adult to see how they respond. And then if the adult moves, then the child stops crying, gets up and follows them and does the same thing. Great, very clear cut example of wanting attention. Then we have tangible. So this is when the person wants access to an item or activity. We see this a lot, like the stereotype for this is the kid is throwing a tantrum in the grocery store because they want a candy or they want that toy. And so we have the screaming, the crying, the throwing themselves on the floor because they want access to the thing. Typically, this happens when they're told no, or when we have to go from the thing we really like to a thing we don't really like, because we still want to engage in that fun thing. And so that's typically where we see this. The tangible, it's important to note that when you're talking about the tangible function, it is not just a handheld object. It can be something like, oh, but I want to go to the pet store. I want to go to the park. I want to go play in the pool. It can be access to those kinds of activities as well. And that would fall under like the tangible. It is access to something that designates the tangible function. And then we have sensory. So when we're talking about a sensory maintained behavior, these typically have no clear antecedent or consequence. And what that means is that there's typically not something clear that happens before the behavior or after the behavior. We assume that this behavior is happening because that person enjoys the sensation that that behavior gives. So a lot of people like to like crack their knuckles or stretching. Mouthing is a common sensory behavior. So having that sensation of something in their mouth could be another example of that. So when we are actually wanting to identify the functions of behavior, there's a couple ways we can go about it. In the school setting, we typically do these through indirect assessments and then direct observation. So indirect assessments look like parent interviews, teacher interviews, and there's this questionnaire that we usually use called a FAST. And so we'll fill that out, and that gives us an idea as to what you're seeing when this behavior happens. And then the other one is direct observation. So this is typically more accurate just because it's observing the student in their natural environment, observing what's going on surrounding the behavior, what's going on in the environment, what does this behavior actually look like for that particular student. And so that way we can kind of narrow down the specifics and come up with an appropriate plan to target that. So when we are doing direct observations, a lot of the time we rely on ABC data. I am sure you guys have heard of this before, but these are just some examples of what those ABC data sheets look like. There's also kind of like blank free response ones, but the idea here is to really narrow down what is going on. So in the top one, you can kind of see you have the antecedent. So anything that happens before the behavior. What is the thing that kind of set the behavior off, right? So that's our antecedent. Then we have our actual behavior. What did this look like? What were they actually doing? And then consequence. Consequence isn't inherently negative. It's just what happened after the behavior occurred. This particular data sheet has duration of the behavior and then intensity, which is additional information that's always good to have. And then you have a simpler one down here where they actually include settings. So where were we when this behavior is happening? Were we in the class? Were we in small group? Were we going from recess back to class? Was there a special event going on? So setting can also be really important because we can behave differently in different settings. So keeping that kind of context in mind would also be very helpful. And then it goes through the same thing, antecedent, what happened before, what our behavior was, and then what happened right afterwards. So when we're talking problem behaviors, ideally, these are the ones that we want to reduce, right? In order to do that, we need to know what the function is. So the appropriate management strategies can be put in place. And so we cannot appropriately do that without identifying the function. It kind of works like a seesaw. So when we want to decrease the problem behaviors, we want to increase replacement behaviors. And replacement behaviors are things that we want the student to engage in. So instead of yelling when we want attention from the teacher, our appropriate replacement behavior would be like, we want them to raise their hand. So what do we want to teach them in order to get rid of that problem behavior? It's not going to magically go away. We do have to give them some kind of replacement, something new to do that serves that same function. So there are two requirements for replacement behavior. One has to serve the same function as the problem behavior. So if the problem behavior is for attention, then the replacement behavior needs to be for attention, and a more appropriate way to get that attention. And then the second criteria for replacement behavior is that it needs to be easier or have the same response effort as the problem behavior. If me engaging in this replacement behavior is a lot harder than the problem behavior, I will never engage in that replacement behavior. The chances of that happening are very, very low because it's a lot easier for me to just start screaming and crying versus doing whatever it is you want me to do. So we do have to keep in mind response effort and kind of keep them either the same or ideally the replacement behavior is even easier. And that way it's more enticing for them to actually engage in that replacement behavior. So when it comes to replacement behaviors, like we said, it is based on function. So the next couple slides, we're just going to go over some common replacement behaviors for each of the functions. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is nowhere near entirely comprehensive, but this is just to give you an idea as to what that would look like. So when we are talking about escape maintained behaviors, common things are requesting for a break, requesting for help, maybe asking to do it a little later. We want our students to be able to advocate for themselves, but we want them to obviously do it in a way that is appropriate and that they can use in their day-to-day lives. Teaching them how to transition from preferred to non-preferred. So obviously, we all like to relax. No one really likes to do work. No one likes to go to doctor's appointments and these kinds of things, but these are a part of life. And so learning how to deal with and tolerate those transitions from the things we like to the things we don't is also a pretty key goal to be working on. When it comes to school academic related tasks, remaining on task. So actually focusing and sitting and doing our work. You can also do this by, one option is by measuring duration. Like how long are they working before I need to step in and kind of redirect them or help them. And so setting up a way to slowly increase how long they're able to pay attention by themselves. And then using a visual schedule. So like giving them an awareness of what's expected, what's going on. Children in general have a very hard time with time and those kind of abstract concepts. So adding a visual schedule is a great way for them to see like, okay, these are the things I have to do before it's snack time. And so like having that tangible thing in front can help mitigate some of those behaviors. Then we have attention. So there's times we all want attention, whether we're texting, we want to text someone, or we pick up the phone and call someone, or I go visit a friend's house. And so we want to teach our students appropriate ways to actually ask for attention. And so simple things like that could be requesting attention, whether it's raising our hand, saying someone's name, tapping on the shoulder. There's a lot of different ways we can request attention. Then waiting. We've all had it that when we were growing up, parents were maybe on the phone or talking to an adult and we wanted something from them. And so we're like, hey, mom, 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 mom. And then they're like, hey, you need to wait. Attention isn't always available immediately. So actually isolating and working on waiting for attention would be a really good one. So we understand that we will get it, just not this very second. Initiating interactions. How can we approach people to talk to them? How can we approach our peers? And how can we engage with them? For those that struggle with social skills, learning how to make on-topic comments. How do I actually engage? How do I hold a conversation? Whoop. And then what does appropriate play look like? How do I actually share my toys? How do I take turns? How do I play with these different things? Can help get attention in the appropriate manner of that peer engagement. On the tangible side, we have things like requesting access. So, hey, can I have the red crayon? Same thing, like we were waiting for attention, waiting for access. Hey, I'm using the red crayon right now, but give me a minute. And then you finish using it and then you hand it over. So learning how to wait for access for things, accepting alternatives. If it's raining outside, going to the playground is not really an option, right? So at that point, it's, hey, I'm sorry, we don't have that right now, but we can do these other things. So do we want to play with Legos or do we want to color? And so we can give alternatives. Not the most preferred thing, right? But sometimes we have to learn to accept that what we want isn't a possibility. And so teaching to accept these alternatives is a great way to kind of work on that. They still get access to something they like, but not necessarily the thing they were asking for. Taking turns during structured activities. So taking turns with the ball, taking turns during a board game, and then actually sharing items. So these are just a couple examples of replacement behaviors for the tangible function. So with the sensory maintained behaviors, the biggest thing to keep in mind is that the replacement behavior needs to be equivalent to the type of sensory behavior that individual is displaying. So If my kiddo is engaging in mouthing, I'm not really going to give them something like a fidget spinner because that's not going to do anything for them. So when it comes to sensory maintained behaviors, you do really have to look at what the actual behavior is before you can come up with potential things to compete with that. Sensory is a lot of trial and error because we can't see the sensations they're getting out of it. We can't see that input that they're seeking. So there will be trial and error. There's nothing wrong with that. So what I was saying with sensory maintained behaviors is it's okay to have trial and error, but it's a matter of finding and trying out different alternatives for the specific kind of stim or that specific sensory behavior that that particular student has. I did put some examples here of ones that I've seen in my experience that have worked. So for children that enjoy mouthing, things like a chewy necklace or maybe even chewing gum or things like that, would be appropriate versus like picking things up off the floor and putting like random objects in our mouths. When it comes to visual stims, a unique one that I found was like giving the kiddo a kaleidoscope. He really liked putting things like really close to his face. And so we used a kaleidoscope. There's also those like old toys that like you put the pictures in and it's like the red goggle things that you kind of flip through the pictures. That's another good one that I've seen work. For movement stems, adding a sensory band to the client's chair or having like one of those wiggle chair toppers that they can kind of sit on and move around while still appropriately sitting down and engaging the class, or something like a fidget spinner. Again, this is not meant to be exhaustive or a comprehensive list, but at least to give you an idea of how we can pair the problem behavior with a potential appropriate replacement behavior. And no, we don't want to switch to there we go. Cool. So that is all I've got, guys. Sorry for the hiccup. Does anybody have any questions for me?